Celeste is a 2D platformer released in 2018 and became an instant classic due to its amazing controls, impactful story, beautiful graphics, and incredible soundtrack. So in this video essay on Celeste's 7-year anniversary, I will be going through all of Celeste and explaining how and why Celeste is a masterpiece. It begins in the prologue, where you're introduced to the player character Madeline, who attempts to climb Celeste Mountain seemingly to get away from the stress of real life. Here we meet Granny, a cold yet kind old lady who lives at the bottom of the mountain. She goes on to be important throughout the game, but for now she just laughs at us. The music here is calming and feels like the calm before the storm. Then you walk across a collapsing bridge, and you're taught one of the main mechanics of the game, dashing. The first chapter takes us to the Forsaken City, as your first stop on the climb up the mountain. The music used in this level is the same you're hearing now, and it's just an incredible start to the game. This area sets up a lot of the key points about Celeste. Opening platform and eases you in with the satisfying movement of this game, and slowly increases in difficulty. You can also optionally collect strawberries, but I'll talk about them later. Anyway, you're then introduced to Theo, a photographer from Seattle, who's looking for adventure, and follows the you only live once, or the mindset. Theo becomes a significant character later on, and holds great importance to one of Celeste's greatest moments. Anyway, after facing the harsh cold of this frigid city, you finally make it to the summit. There's a memorial honouring those who've fallen on the way to the summit, and this is actually a reference to the original Celeste game on the Pico 8 engine. Anyway, Madeline rests by the campfire, and you move on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 takes you into the old site, a mysterious set of ruins, and this picks off directly from where Chapter 1 left off. Except things are weird. The campsite looks different than it did before, and the text on the monument is weird and scrambling itself. The background is beautiful though and reminiscent of the Northern Lights, and soon you enter into these strange ruins. This gets even more strange as there are these crystal black boxes everywhere, some of them just blocking the way to places or just floating solidly in the middle of everywhere. So after challenging obstacles, you end up in a hidden away area with one lone mirror in the middle. Upon walking past it, a strange reflection is cast. Madeline. But purple? But then the mirror cracks and a strange figure comes out and disappears. But because of this, now those black blobs can now be interacted with, and all you have to do is dash through them. You can now unlock a previously blocked off area, and now you can finally confront the strange mirror person. Its name is Madeline, and it's a part of you, and more specifically the bad parts of you like anxiety, depression and doubt. And then she begins to chase you, and this is the best part of this chapter. Madeline mirrors your exact movement with a few seconds of delay, so each movement must be planned carefully and methodically so you don't get caught. And while it may be obvious, this is such a good example of gameplay mechanics mirroring the story of the game, as this is quite literally a reflection of Madeline, as she's being tormented by a twisted mirror version of herself, just like how Madeline is being mentally tormented by her struggles with mental health. Anyways, you progress, more and more Madelines begin to chase you. Another great part of this sequence is getting the strawberry collectibles. Each one is challenging as you have to plan out each movement so as not to run to Madeline, and operate with a lot more strategy than strawberry challenges up to this point. After a long intense chase, you finally make it out of the ruins, but Madeline's still behind you. So you run and run and run, but then nothing's chasing you anymore. And so you can breathe a sigh of relief. You make it to an old telephone booth, and the phone is ringing. So you pick it up, and there's a strange person talking. Madeline seems to know the person, and they have a strange conversation, until it's revealed that this was just a dream. And Madeline comes out, and then turns the phone booth into a weird monster, and you get bored. You finally wake up from this horrendous dream, and see that the old site is quite different to your dream, yet also quite similar. You run to Theo there, and you both talk about your journey. Theo doesn't think he'll reach the summit, but Madeline wants to. Or more accurately, she needs to. Anyway, the two take an awkward selfie and then you venture off. You encounter the same phone booth from earlier, but this time you hear a comforting voice. It's your mother, and she consoles you. And then the chapter ends with another satisfying end screen. Then you move on to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 starts off outside a broken down and desolate bridge to the Celestial Resort, a rundown hotel with weird and harmful red goop everywhere. So after locating the key, you enter the resort and ring the bell. You meet the concierge, Mr. Oshiro, who appears to be a ghost of some form. Anyway, he relentlessly insists for you to stay at the hotel, even though you decline multiple times and it's in a broken state. But at least you're offered the presidential suite. So you enter and progress through this broken and gooped up resort with Mr. Oshiro, and you find keys and get collectibles. Then you reach the main lobby and Mr. Oshiro becomes really upset, as everywhere is a mess. So out of the kindness of your heart, you risk your life to clean it up. So death after death after death after death, and you finally manage to clean up the first part. Then you find a weird back room with a computer, and this allows you to play the original version of Celeste on Pico 8. Then you encounter Theo, who made it to the resort before you, and is really creeped out by Oshiro, and does the wise thing of getting the fuck out by crawling through the vents. Anyway, 2 more cleans and enough deaths to fill a graveyard later, and you finally cleaned everything, and Mr. Oshiro gives his hotel staff most of the credit. Anyway, you go up the elevator, and hey, it's Theo again. He checks in with you from the vents, and then you head off. You then encounter Mr. Oshiro again, but this time he falls into a downward spiral. It's revealed all of these red blobs have been manifestations of Mr. Oshiro's struggles. Finally, you make it to the presidential suite and there's a mirror there. Wait. Oh shit! Yep, Madeline's back, bitches, and begins to be really cruel to Mr. Oshiro before then crashing through the roof. At this point, Mr. Oshiro is completely broken and begins to spiral even more into self-doubt, and no matter what Madeline does, he's just stuck in his head, repeating the same stuff over and over and over. Through the notes throughout the resort, you learn that this hotel has been closed for over a decade and has fallen into disrepair. The staff were going to end it by summiting the mountain together, but Mr. Oshiro wanted to stay in the resort for one last night, which turned to one last week, which turned to one last month, and next thing you know, he's been here for a decade all alone. Still trapped in his own denial and not wanting to move on. Anyway, you finally make it out the hotel and onto the roof, and you talk to Madeline, who is still really negative. Then Mr. Oshiro fully transforms into a manifestation of all his negative emotions, and so he begins to chase you. Panicked and scrambled, you dash, jump, and do whatever you can to escape this savage beast, narrowly avoiding his charges at you, or dying to it 50 times. Anyway, you finally push past a massive stretch of difficult platforming and reach the end of your path. Mr. Oshiro breaks this path though, and you both fall. He returns to normal and finally moves on, with the announcement that the hotel's closed for repairs. Then it ends with Madeline walking away, as Mr. Oshiro still hides in the resort. I think Mr. Oshiro represents the struggle to move on and accept the past, as his resort is long shut down. And throughout this chapter, we see a harsh internal struggle inside Mr. Oshiro. Speaking of harsh internal struggles and a need for validation, things are about to get really crazy from here, so I would really appreciate if you could subscribe, as these videos take a lot of time to make and it'd help me out so much. And even if you think you subscribe, just check, because really it helps me out so much and allows me to make way better videos. Anyway, on with the video. Chapter 4 takes you to the Golden Ridge, a pink and vibrant set of cliffs and sharp spikes that takes place directly after the events of the last chapter. You're introduced to the first of this level's gimmicks, the Cloud. This bouncy fluff ball can launch you into the sky with the power of a heroin junkie. Then you're introduced to the next gimmick, the Bubble. This goopy geezer launches you into the direction you're holding, and definitely won't kill you in infuriating ways. Next you see Granny again for the first time since the prologue. She says how she enjoys the solitude of living up in the mountains, and how she likes the alone time. She says that Madeline is like her when she was younger. But the parallels go deeper than that, as this chapter is spent mostly isolated, just like how Granny lives. As, besides Granny, you don't see another human for the rest of the chapter. She also says to watch the wind. I wonder what she means by that. Oh, shit. Yep, chapter 4 features the lovely thing of wind mechanics, where Madeline can be blown by the wind, which can make you move faster and assist you in your Sonic cosplay, or can render you unable to move and fast enough to be outran by a snail. Next, you navigate this difficult platforming that makes use of all 3 new gimmicks. Surely they won't have a 4th gimmick to this chapter, right? Wrong! You did it better than me! I spent a month on this script! Anyway, the 4th gimmick is this, a block that when you stand on it, it moves, but if it comes in contact with anything, it breaks. You can also control its movements by pressing the arrow keys. Then you go puzzle after tough jump after bubble after cloud after annoying wind jump and dying so many times over and over. The isolation building up as you're alone for basically the whole chapter, and you're now at the final part. A final giant stretch combining every gimmick this chapter can throw at you, on top of a new gimmick, the snowball. I never raged at this game before, but this death got me close. Anyway, finally, after all this heightened emotions, dying over and over again to tough platforming and being completely alone, you run into Theo, who you haven't seen since the last chapter, and he joins you on the gondola. As it goes up, Madeline mentions how she's struggling to breathe. And as you're about to take a selfie, Madeline appears and starts to shake the gondola. This causes Madeline to panic and she starts to have a panic attack. The tension builds up as the tendrils from the sides of the screen move in closer. But then Theo helps you by teaching you his grandfather's breathing technique to imagine keeping a golden feather afloat. And this is another amazing example of the gameplay mirroring the story and Madeline's journey. As the more you keep the feather in the box, the more everything fades away. The tense music is all but gone, and having overcome all this, you and Theo continue on the gondola ride. The chapter ends with a selfie you took, and a cute ending screen with Madeline and Theo laughing together. You've both made it to chapter 5! Chapter 5 takes place exactly where chapter 4 left off. You and Theo have just gotten off the broken gondola, and are both standing outside the mirror temple. Theo runs in ahead, feeling the call for adventure and desire for photos. So you enter after him, and find his phone on the floor near a mirror. But you reassure yourself, it's nothing serious. In this room you learn about the first mechanic of this chapter, the dash blocks. They move when you dash and can be used in a variety of ways to platform. Then you enter the next room, and here you're introduced to the red bubble. No, not the red bubble that sells bootleg merch. This bloody ball is similar to its brother the green bubble, in that they both launch you in the direction you're holding. But where they differ is that the red bubble keeps going till it's interrupted. These bubbles are really fun to play with, and are used in a variety of ways to solve puzzles. Shortly after, you enter a dimly lit corridor with a pair of glowing red eyes. Oh wait, it was just the wall. Anyway, you encounter Theo, who's stuck inside the mirror. He says he was taking a selfie, and the next thing he knew, he was lying on the ground. Then he says something's coming, and that he needs to run. So you do more puzzles, platforming, and use all of these new mechanics to the best of your ability. The area is really unsettling though, with weird statues everywhere. Everything feels strange until you take a bubble through a large room, until you end up in a chamber with a giant mirror. It sucks you into its vortex, and you're stuck in an abyss. Then you take control of a strange little monster, and you kill Madeline to get out of it. You wake up and everything's different. Red thorny vines wrap the background and red tendrils escape the ground. Then you encounter Madeline, who speaks more negatively to you and fills Madeline with doubt and leaves you scared and sad. Now the monsters from the mirror are here, and there's now another mechanic of this game. It can break blocks and gather objects for you, but also relentlessly chases you and will kill you if you touch it. You wander deeper into the temple and stumble upon Theo, who's trapped inside a cave. You say you're determined to help him, and it's revealed that everything in this temple is a manifestation of Theo and Madeline's negative emotions. So after a lot more platforming, you make it to Theo, and have to carry him all the way out while being chased by these weird eye creatures. Eventually you make it to the final corridor, and doors slam behind you, and giant shockwaves are blasted at you. You are then eventually confronted by a giant and gruesome eye which you throw Theo at to defeat. Then you're hit with immense satisfaction, as the chapter ends with Madeline carrying Theo away from the mirror temple, and on to chapter 6. Chapter 6 opens with a card saying it's impossible to outrun you in Reflection, linking to the title of this chapter, Reflection, and it's similar to Chapter 2 with Madeline chasing you, but it just goes directly against it, as in Chapter 2 Madeline did outrun her reflection being Madeline, so who knows. It starts with Madeline carrying Theo, and you set up a campsite, and have a really heartfelt and emotional conversation. Theo says that you remind him of his sister, who's just like Madeline as they both live in their own heads too much, and are dead set on climbing the mountain. Madeline then opens up about her depression and anxiety, and describes it as being at the bottom of an ocean, unable to see, claustrophobic yet feels so exposed. Theo reveals his grandfather climbed the mountain before he was born, and it changed him for the better, and helped him find the golden feather technique. Madeline then says that she wants to remember this night, so they take a selfie together, and this is just so heartwarming, as for the first time this game, Madeline actually wants to take a selfie, and she looks genuinely happy in it. They then get excited as they'll reach the summit tomorrow, but first they sleep. You wake up to the beautiful northern lights, with calming music in the background, and the higher you climb with the golden feathers, the more the music builds. This scene is just so pretty. Then you reach the top and confront Madeline, and you try confronting her like Theo said, but it doesn't work. The northern lights are suffocated by Madeline's spikes, and your only hope is to imagine the golden feather, and so you try to keep it afloat in the box, but it doesn't work as well as last time. And then Madeline cuts it, and throws Madeline to fall all the way down the mountain. You continue falling for a while, until you end up at the bottom of a lake, with no clue where to go since you've been thrown from the top of the mountain, and it's unlikely you'll be able to reach the summit. And this mirrors how Madeline describes her depression, and her failing to reach the summit would only amplify these feelings. Here you're introduced to the first mechanic of this level, the Kevin, who when dashing into him screams and charges in the direction that was dashed into. And then there's also the golden feather, which I forgot to explain. Basically allows you to fly for a short period of time. So with these abilities you traverse this spiky yet beautiful pit of despair. Then you look in the reflection in a rock, and talk about how upset you are in failing to climb the mountain. Here you meet the next mechanic of this level, the bouncer. This just bounces you around like a pinball, but can allow for some cool platforming. Shortly after you encounter Granny, who talks with you about failing to climb the mountain. And Madeline says that she doesn't want to give up, so your goal now is to confront Madeline. So you do more platforming, and as you do, Madeline's spikes retreat further and further back, until now you're face to face with that part of you. You try to work together, but Madeline is determined to destroy everything, and so you enter one of the coolest parts of the game, an intense boss fight with Madeline, where you need to reach her while avoiding fallen rocks, her energy balls that can kill you, and later on a giant laser. The music here is tense and climactic, and the background feels otherworldly. This really adds to the feeling of the climactic battle that decides the fate of both of you, and perfectly encapsulates Madeline's desire to climb this mountain and conquer her struggles. But the roles are reversed this time, and instead of Madeline chasing you like in Chapter 2, you are chasing her. So after tirelessly and relentlessly giving your all to defeat Madeline with tense and quick platforming, her power is almost fully diminished, and you have defeated her. You can finally confront that part of you. The music cuts as you approach her, before building back as you talk, and Madeline says she wants to work together, and they finally agree to work with each other. This allows Madeline to power up, and now she has pink hair and can do 2 dashes at once. The music here is calm and peaceful, with floating cherry blossoms everywhere. For the first time in this game, you and Madeline feel fully determined to climb the mountain. Madeline has a new ability to launch you up into the air, and you make it back to the surface and see Granny. You thank her for the advice, and then Theo runs in. He says he ran down the mountain to help, and he's glad she's okay. Now with friends by her side and able to confront the darkest parts of herself, Madeline is hopeful and determined to climb and reach the summit. And so you set off to reach the summit in Chapter 7. Chapter 7 starts with a cool cinematic of Madeline looking up the mountain. The music here is determined and optimistic, and it empowers you to conquer this mountain. This chapter takes you through your whole journey climbing Celeste Mountain. You go through each chapter, but the colours and tone are extremely vibrant and warm. The first part of your climb sees you through a lush forest area, not seen the game before, but this represents the very bottom of the mountain, as you fell all the way down back in Chapter 6. You also have the double dash now, so you can use this ability for more interesting platforming and challenges. And at the end of each segment, you have Badlin fling you up to the next part, and you talk optimistically saying the mountain stands no chance. You then make it to the Forsaken City, but the background here is more warm and vibrant than it was in Chapter 1, representing how Madeline has overcame the gloominess that there was upon first entering the Forsaken City. However, the platforming is way more difficult than in Chapter 1, as you have the double dash and more advanced and harder uses of the level gimmicks like the traffic blocks. The music is also extremely upbeat and empowering. You can do this. Then after reaching the end of this segment, you have another talk with Madeline, where she says she's waiting for something to go wrong, but Madeline says that she will support her if it does. And then she says that she's actually starting to believe in Madeline, a real change from the rest of the game where Madeline is an antagonist, repeatedly shutting Madeline down. Then you reach the old site, where again you navigate using the dream blocks and more advanced parkour, and the background is bright and vibrant. After a lot of platforming, you and Madeline have another talk, where she finally compliments Madeline. Then you move over to the Celestial Resort. This section is the moving red blobs, but a lot harder. But the challenge doesn't feel nearly as hard or frustrating in the level, because the vibes are just so good. The vibrant colour and empowering music means you could die 1,000 times and still feel you're making progress, and still improving each time. And after navigating this tough platforming, you reach the end for another chat with Madeline. This time they talk about Mr. Oshiro, where Madeline says not to care. They argue on what's right and if he's a good person or not. Eventually Madeline apologises. Then you make it to the Golden Ridge, and again after pushing through more and more platforming, like the wind and the bubbles, you make it to the end and talk with Madeline once more. Madeline says that you can climb this mountain, and for once she believes in you. Then finally you enter the Mirror Temple, and after some not too difficult platforming, you reach the end for your final talk with Madeline before the summit. You can do this. You are both excited and apologise to each other. So with determination flowing through you, only 30 checkpoints separate you and reaching the summit of the mountain you've been so desperate to climb. So you face difficult segments, but they're no match for you as you are ready for anything, and you will reach the summit. You push on and now there's only 20 checkpoints left, then 10, then 5, then 3, then 2, then 1. The music drowns out, anticipation builds, you ascend the mountain, finally approaching the summit, and finally, you did it. You and Madeline admire the view as you soak in what you've just accomplished, and the satisfying ending music plays. The credits roll as clips play of you descending the mountain. You realise everything you've overcame. From when you first met Madeline in the Mirror Temple, or when Theo was locked in a crystal, or when you almost lost it all and plummeted to the bottom of the mountain, or how most importantly, you overcame all of this, all the tough platforming, all the tough events, and finally managed to reach the summit. Finally, you descend the mountain and reach the epilogue. You're back in Granny's old cabin that you passed at the start of the game, and to celebrate you bake a strawberry pie using all the strawberries you've collected in your playthrough. For everyone you became friends with during your climb on Celeste Mountain. It is really wholesome, and that's the end of the epilogue. You really thought it was over? Well, there's the B and C sides. You are never done with this game. So what are the B and C sides? Well, it's simple really. In each level you can find a strange cassette in a room, involving platforms switching on and off. Anyway, upon collecting this cassette you unlock the B sides. Now I know what you're thinking, that's great and all, but what actually is the B-side? And to that I say, don't interrupt me, I was literally getting to that, shut the fuck. The B-sides are harder variations of each chapter of the game, especially this part in Chapter 3 B-side. Anyway, at the end of each section you get a crystal heart. But what actually is the crystal heart? Well, they're another form of collectible used to unlock levels, like Chapter 8 A, B and C sides. You can find them by completing B and C side levels, but also in the main chapter levels by solving puzzles or finding hidden rooms. And you unlock the C sides by completing the B sides for Chapter 8. But you also unlock the ability to get a golden strawberry. A golden strawberry now spawns at the start of each chapter that you've completed, even B and C sides. And to get it, you have to pick it up at the start of the chapter, and complete the whole thing without dying. And if you die, you go back to the start. Having this is a huge flex. Then there's the C sides. Holy fuck, the C sides! These are the most difficult platform segments in the game. Sure, they're only 3 rooms long, but oh my god, they are the hardest ever. For reference, I replayed through Celeste to make this video essay. I recorded all the time I was playing for background footage, and over half the footage I've gotten for Celeste are on the B and C sides, but most of it being the C sides. Tens of hours of me just dying over and over and over again. Anyway, these segments are not to be taken lightly, and upon completion you get another crystal heart. Chapter 8 takes place 1 year after the events of Chapter 7. You speak to Granny at the front of the cave and she says it's nice to see Madeline again, and that you should follow her into the cave. So you enter and you're immediately introduced to this level's mechanic. You don't get your dash back. Now normally in Celeste, when you dash and touch the ground, you can dash again. But here you have to use your dashes wisely, as they aren't coming back to the next room. So you proceed further and there's a giant barrier. It requires you to collect 4 crystal hearts to open. Here you're introduced to another gimmick, the slidey wall things, which launch you up. Then another gimmick, the heat balls. These hot balls move around and then will kill you if you make contact with them. Then there's another gimmick, this platform that launches you in the direction you're vaguely holding. So after doing more and more platforming, you're introduced to more gimmicks. You can flip this weird clam looking thing, which is a switch, and it makes the whole area cold. And when it's cold, the hot balls turn to blue balls, and you can jump on them, but they shatter once jumping upon them. So you use these mechanics and work your way through tough platforming until you reach the end, where there's a dramatic chase with lava as you frantically try to escape. Then finally it all slows down. You're faced with a big corridor, and you go into the void. Is this it? The center of the mountain? It's peaceful, and in the middle of this void and heart of the mountain is a crystal heart. And after this chapter, you unlock Chapter 9. Chapter 9 was released as a DLC to Celeste, as well as being the longest and hardest chapter in the game by a long shot. Chapter 9 called Farewell deals with the theme of loss after Granny had died, and so Madeline goes through a lot to finally reach acceptance. However, this DLC is massive, and it's so big, and there's so much to go through, that I don't even want to start analysing it in this video, because it would just double it in length. So at some point in the future, look out for a Chapter 9 video essay, because it will be good. The gameplay of Celeste is a metaphor for Madeline's journey up the mountain as she struggles with her issues. You start off inexperienced and scared of this daunting task of a hard platformer, just like how Madeline started the mountain climb to run away from and escape her depression and other issues. But over the course of the game, you learn and improve and adapt, and Chapter 7 doesn't even feel difficult. It feels like a victory lap, as you have overcome so much. And even though you may still die and it's the hardest part of the game so far, it doesn't feel like it, as it's so empowering to play. Just like how Madeline feels after confronting the dark parts of herself and improving because of it. But this journey isn't just Madeline's. It can also be the journey of you, the player, as you can choose what you name the character. This can be your journey, and this game and its story and message has resonated with and helped a lot of people. And I think that's the power and beauty of this game, to give people hope, and to have people believe that you can climb any mountain no matter how big or impossible it may seem. And that's why Celeste is a masterpiece. In conclusion, Celeste is an amazing game. Its controls and mechanics are amazing to play, and its story is one to really make you feel something. And if you've made it this far, why not subscribe? I mean, seriously, only a small percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. And I think that's crazy. So if you want to help me change that, please subscribe. And even if you think you are, just check, because it helps me make way better videos just like this. Anyway, this has been One Day. Thanks for watching.